Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Denver. I'm a co-chair of Reclaim Rhode Island, a proud member of the Rhode Island Cannabis Justice Coalition. It was 1 year ago today, last year on May 25th, that Governor McKee signed into law one of the most progressive, if not the most progressive, cannabis legalization laws in the entire country. Now, 1 year later, the Rhode Island Cannabis Justice Coalition is here to remind state officials that the work to construct a cannabis industry that's just, equitable, and centered around the communities most impacted by the war on drugs did not stop there. It must continue. In 2023, incoming commissioners and other cannabis policymakers have the responsibility to continue consulting, uplifting, and working directly with members of impacted communities to ensure that the Rhode Island Cannabis Act, once implemented, actually delivers on its promises of justice. We're here today with a number of community organizations who have been working together in this fight for cannabis justice here in Rhode Island for a long time. Reclaim Rhode Island, Break the Cycle Cooperative, the formerly incarcerated union, UFCW Local 328, Commonplace Cooperative, and PVD Flowers, a worker-owned cooperative dispensary preparing to apply for a license here in Providence. Together, we are looking forward to a Rhode Island cannabis economy that's defined by racial equity, worker power, and community ownership. I'd like to start by introducing Trip Hopkins, a community organizer with our coalition and a founding member of the worker-owned cooperative cannabis dispensary preparing to apply for that retail license. PVD Flowers. Trip, come on up.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for making it. As Dan said, I'm Trip Hopkins. I'm here to talk about PVD Flowers and the Rhode Island Cannabis Justice Coalition. And I'd like to start on the coalition. So the Rhode Island Cannabis Justice Coalition, or the coalition as I'll be calling it during this talk, because that's a mouthful, it is a organization, a coalition formed out of outreach for the Rhode Island Cannabis Act. In this coalition, we have a lot of different local organizations like Reclaim Rhode Island, UFCW Local 328, and Break the Cycle Cooperative Hub. And we want to make it a hub for worker cooperatives, worker cooperative cannabis dispensaries, worker cooperative cannabis businesses in Rhode Island, and be able to ensure a smooth rollout of the Rhode Island Cannabis Act. So what we've done in the past, we've done a lot of things. We have done community outreach. We've hosted an event at DARE, that's Direct Action for Rights and Equalities, where we told the public about what the Rhode Island Cannabis Act is, why the worker cooperative model is really important, and why they should care, and what we're doing to fight against the oppressive forces we see in this country that have included racist cannabis policing, the so-called war on drugs, etc. We've released a value statement kind of really lining out what we'd like to see from the Rhode Island Cannabis Act. We implored the General Assembly and the governor to appoint to the commission and the advisory board people who will represent social and racial equity, labor solidarity, minority-owned businesses, the worker cooperative model, and also make sure that the people are focused on helping those who are directly impacted by, again, the so-called war on drugs. We're here today because we want to make sure that what we've been working on, the values that we have previously stated, and all the work we have done is continued to be heard by the General Assembly, by the governor, and that the Rhode Island Cannabis Act can continue to be for the people and provide what it already has provided in record expungement, etc., and even more. Because cannabis is something that has been historically used against those most impacted by the systems in this country, and we need to ensure that they receive justice. And next, I'm going to transition a little bit into PVD Flowers, give a quick spiel about who we are, what we do. PVD Flowers is a startup worker cooperative weed dispensary. It is all people of color owned, which I think is so amazing. I love to be a part of this. We have done a lot of work. We started about, I got involved in PVD Flowers about August of last year with some encouragement from Rod Pena of Reclaim Rhode Island and PVD Flowers and Kyrie Shivers. We have been able to work on our bylaws as a worker cooperative, which has been a very big step. We're still currently working on them, but we're getting them down. We hope to get them down soon. We've been developing a business plan. We've attended a cohort training from an organization called Co-op Cincy. That's a Cincinnati-based organization that provides services to different worker cooperative and unionized businesses in order to help them succeed. And we've talked to community members, we've conducted surveys, we've worked with the coalition to get materials out about PVD Flowers. But yeah, we're here, we're getting the groundwork done now. I really like that I can be part of PVD Flowers, which is doing a lot of the groundwork, and then be a part of the coalition, which is kind of looking at the bigger picture as well. But yeah, we have a lot of great people who are going to be speaking today, so I'm not going to speak any further. And thank you so much for your time. TRIPP, 2 P's.
All right, I'm about to introduce Representative Cherie Cruz, who a year ago, when we were getting this passed into law, was not a state representative, but a leader of the formerly incarcerated union who was working non-stop to make sure that the legislation was perfectly written to ensure that criminal records could indeed be automatically expunged, tirelessly working to get that done. And on that note, before I introduce Cherie, Rep. Cruz, we do want to emphasize that the governor's nominees are going before the Senate, and we really encourage the Senate to ask questions about the sort of themes that we're bringing up today. Ask the commissioners. We really implore senators, ask the commissioners about their plans for ensuring that worker ownership, this historic reservation of 6 licenses for worker-owned cooperatives, is a success, that the racial, social, and economic justice that really animated, propelled this law forth is implemented in the very same spirit. Without further ado, Rep. Cherie Cruz.
Thank you for being here today, everyone here in solidarity to advocate for a just and equitable cannabis industry here in Rhode Island. You know, as someone who's been directly impacted by the harmful impacts of the war on drugs and to see throughout my community, I know all too well, as many of you here today, the generational and cyclical harms on this failed drug war and why we need to continue to work to repair those harms to our loved ones and our fellow Rhode Islanders. I stand here now as an advocate and a new state legislator to advocate that those closest to the impact of these harms are centered and meaningfully involved in any legalization implementation efforts from the ground all the way up. We're here today to call on our governor to make sure that implementation of the Rhode Island Cannabis Act operates according to the same values and principles in which we work so hard alongside his team and the legislator in passing this act. These values of the coalition represent our priorities for how social equity is realized through the Rhode Island Cannabis Act, as you heard Tripp share, as you heard Dan share, and these values of social and racial equity, labor solidarity, minority-owned business, cooperative ownership, and consulting the directly impacted when we move forward with this act. We can't stress enough that policy decisions and nominations to leadership positions should be centered around seeking a just and equitable cannabis industry based around these aforementioned principles. You'll hear more about why these principles are important from the speakers who you just heard from and who you were about to hear from today in more detail, and why each of these are so critical to a just and equitable cannabis industry here in Rhode Island. So with that, I'd like to call up another speaker, someone who's dear to my heart, a resilient, powerful Rhode Islander who's been there from ground up, as Dan shared, part of that with the formerly incarcerated union, as someone directly impacted, as a mother, as a patient, and as a Rhode Island resident who's working tirelessly to repair those harms. So I want to welcome up with love Raquel Baker.
So I am just going to tell you a little of my struggles on obtaining my medicine. Again, I'm Raquel Baker. I am so grateful to be here and be a part of this co-op. When I first started advocating was back in 2014, when I had obtained my medical marijuana license and I had an open case with DCYF. I was in a really bad life-altering car accident in 2009, and my head went out the driver's side window, resulting with me having a traumatic brain injury and being disabled on my left side. I never wanted to take the medicine they were offering me, and thank God, because look at the world today. I found relief in cannabis, weed, so when I found out it was medically passed in this state, I went out and got my license. I presented my doctor's letters and a letter of my own and the plan of use that I created with my providers, and the judge approved the plans of reunification still with my son. From there, I started having unsupervised visits with him, and for whatever reason, my Providence record got changed to Bristol, and he made my life hell. I just had court and was approved for 2 8-hour unsupervised visits per week, and my next court date wasn't for 3 months. When my new worker came on my case, he asked why I was testing positive for THC and didn't care that I had my license, and again was making me jump through hoops. I tried it. He was a no-call, no-show for visits. He would show up a half hour late for my now 1-hour visits, and I didn't know how to navigate the system at all to make a complaint about the department because his supervisor signed off on whatever he did. 2 months in, right before my next court date, I relapsed on drugs, feeling helpless and hopeless and beaten. As soon as I did, he filed for GPR, and I was unable to pick myself back up. Thank God my aunt adopted him. He's in a good home. A few years later, I got pregnant again and had my son Hercules. Before he turned 1, I went to a program called Starbirth, and again, thank God I did, because that's where my role model, Cherie Cruz. I had the same DCYF worker for my second son, and he would say things like, "You're not gonna smoke weed again, right?" I told Cherie what he put me through and what he was saying, and she let me know he wasn't supposed to do or say any of those things. I decided not to go through with reunification with him. I couldn't handle it. So when I left there, I stayed in contact with Cherie, and one day she asked me if I wanted to testify for cannabis rights and told me that by telling my story, I would be fighting so that what happened to me doesn't happen to another mother. I have been advocating any chance I get, and I am so grateful to be a part of this co-op because I can't picture wanting to work anywhere else or being able to. So for me, cooperative ownership gives people who have been directly harmed by the war on drugs, including formerly incarcerated individuals, the opportunity to build wealth, develop professional skills, attain financial security, and participate in supportive communities, all generated out of the same industry that originally caused me harm. For myself, cooperative ownership has given me opportunities that I haven't had before. It's given me the power to get back on my own 2 feet and be a part of building something bigger than myself, all along with the solidarity and participation of my fellow community members who are so great. The Rhode Island Cannabis Justice Coalition has been saying for a long time that cooperative ownership is an essential piece of cannabis justice, and we're proud that the Rhode Island Cannabis Act reserves 6 licenses for worker-owner cooperatives. This will ensure that the wealth and benefits of the cannabis industry filter back into the pockets of the communities, not the pockets of the huge industries. As I work every day to build PVD flowers, I call on state officials and commissioners to ensure that worker-owned cannabis cooperatives in Rhode Island have the resources they need to thrive and deliver economic and social justice for everyone. Thank you.
All right. Next up, I'm really pleased to introduce David Allen Sumner Sr., better known as Bear, an important community voice from Break the Cycle Cooperative Hub. And come on up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, well, I guess let's get right to it. Tough acts to follow indeed. But as they said, my name is David Allen Sumner. Everybody knows me as Bear. And I've been advocating in the city of Providence for the past 30 years. So it's been a long road, to say the least. I am a part of Break the Cycle Cooperative Hub here in Providence, Rhode Island. And we've been attempting to build cooperative businesses for BIPOC communities. So the need to have social representation during this process is very important. A good friend of mine once said to me that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And last year, the Speaker of the House sent a list of nominations to the governor, and being that the commission will be establishing rules and regulations concerning social equity licenses, cooperative businesses, a person from the community who is also adept in cooperative business models and all of its principles should have a seat on the advisory board. A very important dynamic about community representation is that it's hard to have empathy and understanding if you haven't walked in the mile of shoes of somebody from a BIPOC community. This is a great opportunity to repair the damage done by the war of drugs, of course, in underrepresented and BIPOC communities across the country. We here at Rhode Island Cannabis Justice Coalition have the responsibility of representing the people in these communities to teach them the value of this great opportunity. We're talking jobs and the opportunity to begin the path of generational wealth for families who never thought of such a thing before. When I think of social equity and racial equality, I see communities being educated in the benefits of marijuana and all of its byproducts for health reasons. And with that being said, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last but far from least, Sam Marvin, a union representative with UFCW Local 328. UFCW, the legalization, winning one of, if not the most progressive cannabis legalization laws in the country would not have been possible without UFCW's support. And an equitable, just cannabis industry is not possible without labor power and unions. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody. My name is Sam Marvin. I'm a union representative with UFCW Local 328. At Local 328, we're proud to represent and partner with cannabis workers from cultivations to dispensaries across Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Across the country, the UFCW proudly represents tens of thousands of workers, cannabis workers, to ensure that workers have a voice in the job to build sustainable futures for working families and the communities that they live in. Additionally, the UFCW has recently launched the first ever cannabis apprenticeship program that will offer career building skills and professional development to workers, and is a program we look to launch here in Rhode Island. We are proud to be part of the Rhode Island Cannabis Justice Coalition, where our collective focus has been on establishing the most equitable and just cannabis industry in the country. Last year, we applauded the passage of the Rhode Island Cannabis Act that included key elements such as automatic expungement of cannabis records, fair labor standards, and establishing the first in the country licenses for worker-owned co-ops. Building worker power through protecting the rights of workers to organize, secure a union contract, and pursue worker ownership is central to the cannabis justice movement here in Rhode Island. We stand in solidarity with directly impacted communities in establishing an equitable and just cannabis economy that lifts barriers and creates new economic opportunities. In the coming months, the Cannabis Commission and an advisory board will have the responsibility of establishing the rules and processes for the expanded legal market. It is critically important that those appointed and confirmed to these positions are committed to ensuring that the goals and values promised in this legislation are fulfilled. Values of social and racial equity, labor solidarity, investment and business development, training, and access to capital for directly impacted communities, a commitment to investing and supporting worker-owned businesses, and repairing the harms caused by cannabis prohibition. We strongly encourage the governor, the Senate, and every elected official to prioritize these values every step of the way, from the nomination to the confirmation process, from rulemaking to the issuing of new licenses. I just want to thank our coalition partners and all the speakers for being here today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll take any questions in a moment, but I just want to emphasize that the commissioners have been nominated. We would really like to see senators ask them about their vision and values and plans in terms of the key principles that guided the cannabis legalization law in the first place: social, racial, and economic justice. And the advisory board has yet to be named, and we really strongly encourage that advisory board reflect directly impacted communities. Any questions?
Does the coalition have any sense of the commission members who have been nominated so far, and what are your thoughts?
I don't think we're prepared to comment on those particular individuals, but because we actually don't know what they believe on these matters. But we think we hope that they have good answers and that the senators ask them good questions.
So we'll see that later today, I guess. Or is that today? No, I'm sorry. We'll see later.
I was like, uh-oh.
No, we'll see when the Senate takes it up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Were any co-ops consulted in the process of selecting the nominees?
I think that I can't comment on that, but I would say that like lines of communication should be far more open than they are now.
Okay. And the advisory commission, you're open for more input?
Yes.
And do you plan on attending the hearings and testifying there as well?
Certainly. If a technical process question that Steve might know the answer to.
You are usually allowed to testify.
Yes, that we will certainly be testifying.
Yes, usually that is the case.
Our parliamentarian and reporter, Steve Alquist.
Yeah.